and over 300 scientists from 15 countries. And again, as I say, not knowing who exactly is in the audience this morning, I would think that many of you, or some of you, may have been part of this process. And at every stage of this process, we wanted our traditional knowledge to guide and verify the scientific findings. And so we were able to virtually inject that into as many chapters as possible and into many chapters. And that resulted in the combination of the two knowledge systems. And, you know, because so often Indigenous knowledge is cited as anecdotal and not as strong as Western science, but in reality, our scientists that were involved in this process learned so much from our own men and our hunters and elders, because they certainly may not have the institutional recognition, but they are scientists in their own right, as they do have that very intimate knowledge of the cycles of nature and with all that is going on around them. Without that, we would have perished long ago rather than thrive for millennia in the environment that we live in. So our wisdom and the guidance were integrated into every facet of the assessment. And it was prepared for over 4 years, and when it was released in 2004, it had tremendous effect around the world. I think you saw that newspapers around the world printed the photos of the ice and the glaciers that were melting, and the stressed marine mammals and the polar bears that were up there at the time. And so at that time, it was just a remarkable time where there had been such a void on the science of climate change around the world, but yet when this came out, it was on the most detailed, comprehensive assessment, and it happened to be on the circumpolar world. So I certainly commend all of those who worked on that assessment. It was just a powerful time for all of us to be able to put forward that stellar science that was incorporating traditional knowledge of the indigenous peoples of the Arctic. It was really groundbreaking on many levels. And one of the other groundbreaking ways in which we really pushed hard for was that it wouldn't be just another science piece, that there would be policy recommendations attached to it. And in that sense, I think we made some history there. Every day now, I wake up hoping to hear better news about what is happening and how the trends are not as bad as projected, as we have been hearing. But the recent science, however, has only presented even a starker picture for us in the Arctic. And recent research published in the journal Nature predicted that our Arctic Ocean may be ice-free by the summer of 2030, which is about 33 years from now. But last year, even without the data from the tremendous melt that stunned scientists around the world, the most alarming estimate showed a new ice-free seasonal sea at the top of the world within a decade. That's a possibility. So more than ever, there is that sense of urgency. And although I never say that I am trying to alarm the world into taking action, because for me, I don't have that alarmist energy, or there's no hysteria in the work that I do at all. But there is that sense of urgency because we are witnessing those changes so very intimately on a daily basis. And because nowhere else in the world does the ice and snow represent mobility and transportation as it does for us in the Arctic. So when things start to happen where the sea ice starts to thin or it's not forming effectively and there's not enough snow on the land, then it becomes an issue of safety and security. And so these are very real for us. Just as I was leaving the other day, 2 days before coming down, one of our hunters fell through the ice once again. So these aren't just stories that you read about in the newspapers, but they are actually happening day to day. And just a few weeks ago in my hometown of Kuujjuaq, where I was born in the northern part of Quebec in a place called Nunavik, the region called Nunavik, we had record-breaking highs, temperatures 14 degrees above the average in May alone. Everything melted very quickly, the river went out very quickly, and our hunters, who normally are still on the land traveling by skidoo or by snowmobile, are, hunting the geese in the spring, had to walk for many hours in order to go. And just last week, and again, it is becoming more of an emergency for us in one of our communities of Pangnirtung. Perhaps you've heard about that in the papers recently. Some storms that have really bad storms brought in flooding, high winds, and it's now a state of emergency in that community. Now, that community has always been hit the hardest in terms of climatic changes because of the Cumberland Sound and the currents that go around that area. But these flood waters cut through, in fact, new channels straight through the melting permafrost right to the bedrock. And so now as we speak, and I just saw on my email this morning, things seem to be getting worse because now they're finding sinkholes. And they're starting to think that there is a connection between the melting of the permafrost in that community, and now there is quite a bit of danger going on. So this is real. It's not something that is that we think could happen in the future. These are things that we're faced with already now. The newest projections, of course, come from Dr. James Hansen, the head climatologist or scientist at NASA in the U.S., show that CO2 has already reached on a sustainable level in our atmosphere, and we must reduce as quickly as possible. And we have to reverse those trends as well, of course, entirely, if we are to avoid the rapid and wholesale transformation of the Arctic ecosystem. Because we know that there is as much life under the ice and in the ice as above the ice. And the small living organisms under the ice are as important as the furry animals above that everybody seems to want to save and not see the connections of how it all has great importance to everybody. And so it's really important that we start thinking in terms of all of it connects. And what role can traditional knowledge play in this effort? And what can all of you assembled here do to help that knowledge influence national and global policy making? Well, we Inuit are uniquely adaptable people. We've had to adapt. I mean, you can imagine our entire way of life for millennia, even though we are now living in the modern world, are still very connected to a hunting culture and in the pursuit of animals, and we depend upon them. And it is our tradition, and it is highly, very nutritional in terms of the food that we eat. And so we have weathered this storm of modernization very well, remarkably well, considering how quickly this has happened. And I myself have traveled from dog team at the first 10 years of my life before being sent away for school, and then the transition came while I was away, and then motorized snowmobiles came into play. But it all happened very quickly in one lifetime. And we have weathered this storm fairly well, going from dog team and from igloo-vigax to modern homes and so on. But, you know, and this has happened in one lifetime where most societies have taken about 350 years. For us, it's one lifetime. And it does give that new meaning of coming from ice age to space age in one lifetime.